everyone. Welcome to the Maritime Software Hub, the People Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Carl King of Seafarer Social. Carl, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on board, and yeah, love to learn a bit more about you and what you do. If you could just share a quick intro.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Callum. Really excited to be on the podcast. So I run a digital marketing consultancy business called Seafarer Social, and we work with businesses and organizations within the shipping industry that are interested in communicating directly to seafarers and using digital platforms, the main ones like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, etc., to connect with them.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting, and yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast. And I appreciate you reaching out to me and kind of showing interest in the show itself. So it's really going to be an interesting discussion, just to again shine the spotlight more on the seafarers themselves, and have a closer look at how technology is kind of impacting their day-to-day lives. And also, I'd quite like to dive a bit into your role in the marketing world. We obviously help kind of a number of maritime SaaS companies recruit across sales and marketing and product management. So really interesting to hear a bit about your role, what it's like to be kind of in a digital marketing focused role. So we'll get to that a bit later. Why don't you start, if it's okay? Tell us a bit about how you kind of got into shipping and you started sort of this journey of working closely with the seafarers.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to start from the beginning, because for complete transparency, I never knew that I was going to ever enter the world of shipping. I originally studied at University International Business and Accounting, and my dream was when I started, was to go into the world of finance. And just after graduating, I quite quickly realised that wasn't the direction for me. And instead, my first job was working for a company from the Essential subsidiary, and it was an advertising company. So, big listed company with about 15 to 20 other, very similar to Informa, 15 to 20 other businesses underneath them, and I worked for one of those guys. And my job was to work with creative directors from the biggest advertising companies in the world, and I was helping them with campaigns and how they can win awards. Essentially, there's a big award show every year called Cannes Line, very similar to the Oscars, if you will, for the film industry. And I was speaking to creative directors, as I said, and helping them with how they can win these awards. And I became really fascinated with advertising, really fascinated with creating campaigns, digital campaigns that sort of exploded. But what I quite soon realized was that there was a lot of opportunity to create these amazing campaigns, but on a smaller budget. And that's when I decided to leave the company because of COVID as well. I came back home and I started my first business, which was a marketing agency called Organic Marketing Services. And the goal of Organic Marketing Services was to work with small to medium-sized businesses, primarily within the marine leisure industry, because I'm based in Portsmouth. My family are in the marine leisure world, and that's kind of where the first sort of touch point, somewhat. I know it's different, but the direction towards shipping sort of started. So I started working with, like I said, small marine leisure companies, helping them with their digital marketing tasks, developing social media campaigns, running paid advertising. But the idea was to, like I said, work with SMEs who don't have massive conglomerate budgets. And then one day I was pitching to some startup tech guys on LinkedIn who run a maritime business. They just recently secured their first round of investment, and it was basically an app for seafarers. And the idea of this app was to help seafarers find job. And originally I was pitching to them to try and get them on board as a client of mine for Organic Marketing Services. But our synergy was really good. They really liked the work I was doing, and they offered me the job. And the job was global head of marketing. And they said, "Hey, look, we really like you. We want to work with you. Do you want to come out to the Philippines? We've launched this app. We need to get more Filipino seafarers on our database. We've got a small budget. We've got, give you complete flexibility to try things yourself. come out, let's see how it goes. And this was where it all started for me. I went out to the Philippines, and before this, I did some research into seafaring. We were working from a similar WeWork space in Glasgow, where the company was founded, and we were sort of researching seafarer influencers, and we were watching people like Chief McCoy, and we were really diving deep into these digital role models that were within the industry, and that's when I really became interested in the lifestyle, the stories, etc. And then I eventually went out to the Philippines, and I was there for around 12 months to begin with. And yeah, my job was to basically be on the ground at the maritime schools, speaking to seafarers on the streets, bringing the camera around with us, and really researching and filming and creating content with these guys and girls. And when I say researching and filming, I don't mean just taking them out for a coffee or something. I literally went to the maritime schools. I trained in the maritime schools. I ate with cadets. I had such an amazing experience, but it taught me so much about these guys and girls, and why, what the who, what, where, when, and whys are, what, how passionate they are about the idea of becoming a seafarer. And then I really fell in love with the job. So that was my entry into the seafaring world, and I've never looked back since.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story, and great to sort of see how you kind of got bit the sort of shipping bug essentially. I think a lot of it, people that maybe weren't initially from the industry, just their eyes kind of open up when they realize the type of people that are involved, and the opportunities there. So it's great that you have that hands-on experience, in particular speaking with the guys and girls in the Philippines. Is very unique, I think. A lot of the technology kind of vendors and suppliers we speak to, I think that insight is really incredibly valuable. So look forward to diving into that in a little bit. I guess now, so obviously with the current business, what sort of are the main sort of projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so we're working with some organisations currently. I can't say who due to NDAs, but we're working with some organisations, and we're helping them with their social media strategies. They want to connect to seafarers. They want to communicate with seafarers. And I think one thing I've learned is, after leaving the Philippines and coming back to the UK and starting Seafarer Social, one of the things that I became really aware of when I was speaking to seafarers is that they kind of feel overwhelmed with the amount of technology sometimes that's being introduced to them. They don't really know what platforms to use. And sometimes the introduction from the shipping companies to the new technology is a little bit inadequate. They still don't quite understand it. So what I did is I was like, right, why don't we use the platforms that we know they're using on a daily basis? Because if you go on their phone and you look at their screen time, I guarantee most of it is one of those top four: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Top five, sorry, depending on their rank. And I said, I think there's a really big opportunity, because it's exactly what I did with the previous company I was working with. We just relied on digital marketing to be able to get them onto our platform to begin with, and using these massive platforms. Facebook was huge for us. Facebook's it all changes country to country. Now I'm working with seafarers in India. Now I'm working with seafarers in Indonesia, and each country, each culture sort of uses different platforms. Also, TikTok banned in India, etc. But yeah, to come back to your original question, I started Seafarer Social. My goal was, like I said, to just work with organizations and businesses that want to communicate to seafarers directly, that want to educate seafarers, that want to just create some sort of dialogue with them through social media. And that's where I'm really passionate about. And we've got some fantastic results. Recently ran a campaign with one of my organizations to get more sign-ups to their newsletter. And we've seen some amazing numbers just in 10 days time, working on digital campaigns, working on with what we call seafarer influencers, who are these really big role models in the space that have giant follower bases, but more importantly, organic follower bases, concentrated audiences of seafarers and cadets. So these are really valuable assets to us.
And what type of client base are you mainly talking to? Because if they're reaching out to the seafarers, is it for them to gain a better understanding of their kind of their habits, their interests, the way they interact with kind of technology, or just general day-to-day life, or is there another angle to this? What's other type of people that are reaching out to them, would you say, in general?
Yeah, sure. So there's two sides to it. There's the organization. So you've got the charities, and those guys are interested in communicating with seafarers because they need, for their donors, they need to see that they're engaging with seafarers, and digital communication is really important for them. So developing content and seeing feedback from seafarers is so valuable for the charities. Obviously, a lot of them rely on physical communication, and that's very important, whether it be on the phone, whether it be at ports, etc. That's so important. But as time goes on, in order to be able to create a more macro effect and touching more seafarers' lives, they need to be able to create strong digital channels. So that's one side, the organizations. And the other side, you've got the businesses, the private sector. And for these guys and girls, it might not necessarily be about communicating directly to the seafarer for a sales purpose, because 99.9% of the time, it's not the seafarer that's the decision maker. They're not physically buying the product most of the time. However, what we are finding is that a lot of businesses nowadays are like, actually, we do want to communicate to the seafarer to educate them on our product. Because although we've successfully sold it to X amount of shipping companies, we don't want to have to rely on them to be able to get the most out of the product. Why don't we sell it to the shipping company, but then use our digital communications to speak directly to the seafarer in order to be able to educate them on how to use the product and get the most out of it? There's sort of two sides. And then you've also got research purposes as well, like you mentioned, if you want to just get some general research and speak to seafarers. And that's very important as well. One thing I found to touch on furthermore is that specific cultures, Philippines, for example, they kind of feel sometimes like they don't want to let people down. So they might not they might just say yes. They might just say, ask them, yes, I can do that. Yes, I know what that means. It's not always 100% true because they're fearful that they don't want to lose their jobs. So actually creating digital spaces is very important because it means somewhat they feel safer to respond to surveys, to research that you're putting out there. So they're the three sort of areas, really. Communication, because it has to be seen for the organization. Businesses who want to educate and don't want to have to rely on the shipping company to do it themselves. Or those who are out there trying to find research, fill out surveys, etc., and speak to the seafarers directly.
And it's a bit like, and I guess also jobs as well. They reach out to seafarers, advertising jobs, that type of thing. But in the UK, we have the RNLI, which we've kind of been sponsoring for years and things. And I mean, I get packs like literally every, I don't know, month or whatever it is through the post of these. It's almost a little bit overkill of the information and all the sort of material they send. It's awesome, but I imagine in the commercial shipping world, trying to hear the stories of the seafarers and what it's like day to day, it's less known, I'd say, less publicized. But if we just, I know RNLI is a bit of a random case study, but there's like the Saving Lives at Sea, I think it's called, TV program I watch quite regularly, and it's very much kind of like front of mind. But I guess for the general seafaring community, it's a little bit unknown, a bit in the dark about what their day-to-day life is on board a ship and sort of when they're in the middle of the Atlantic, what that looks like realistically. So what you're doing, I think, is really, really, really fantastic, and trying to help promote that connection between sort of the general public and the companies and the seafarers. So it's pretty awesome. Cool. All right. So you've kind of already touched upon that. So Seafarer Social, in a sense, how would you just give an overview of what you're doing as the business?
Yeah, sure. So I think just to move on from what you said about the RNLI as well, because I think that's a really interesting point. One thing I found is, I could have gone into any industry really, and shipping for me was just sort of where I naturally fell into, and I'm so happy I did. But I think one of the biggest things that really excite me about shipping is the opportunity to tell stories. Because you're right, there are so many case studies from outside of shipping that you can sort of look at as inspiration to see actually when digital campaigns are done right, they can create such a big effect. Let me give you some more examples, right? So and this is completely outside of shipping, but I think it's really important because it does directly correlate. If you look at women's football in the UK, when I first when I was younger and I started walking the dog around the local field, you would never ever see, very rarely, a female kicking football about. It was all guys on the football pitch, all wearing David Beckham shirts, etc. Then all of a sudden, if we fast forward years ahead, the women football team go on to win the Euros, and just overnight, I see females playing football everywhere. Little girls with Beth Mead t-shirts, kicking balls around, and now they're going on to selling out the Emirates, selling out Wembley, and it just has completely transformed that industry. Now I know it's completely different, but it just goes to show you that when digital campaigns, TV are doing fantastic events that revolutionize an industry. And what's more important as well, to interlay back to the seafarer influencers, you have these role models, these 11 ladies who are, completely and utterly inspiring, not just women, but men, by how powerful their message are. We are ladies, but look how great we are. Look, we can set out these stadiums. We can perform just as well as the men. And now you've seen it starting to trickle down into the wider public, and you now see, if you go out there now, how many girls are saying they dream to play for the Lionesses one day.
Yeah.
And I'm not for one single second saying that it's straightforward. I know how confusing shipping is. I'm still very new into the industry, and I know just how many regulations there are. You're dealing with a global workforce. It's very, very tricky to really navigate around these sorts of things. And it will take time, and it will take education, and it will take funding. But I really believe that in the years to come, especially when my generation start to come through, you will see these changes happen. Because right now, 2% of seafarers are females. That's not okay, because you're missing out on 50% of the world's talent. Think how much talent there is there. And I think once you start to really fix that issue of female seafarers, then you'll start to see things like the LGBTQ community come through, and it will sort of become a modern day workforce with the best talent, which is so important, especially with all the changes that are happening in innovation with ships, and so on and so forth. We need to have more talent. Everyone keeps talking about recruitment, retention, gaps in the skilled labour market. We're constantly hearing these terrible stories about seafarers on the news. Just on Monday, BBC covered the P&O ferry situation. So we need to start creating fantastic campaigns that really show the positive side of this industry, because there is so much positivity. It's such a fantastic career.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of other, more recent examples in the UK. We've got even Clarkson's Farm. If you look at that, the farming industry, it has absolutely exploded, the interest in that, just off some very kind of big influence and things. And way back, one of the first, I guess, sort of like what real time CV was Deadliest Catch. Like, if you think about the crab fishermen in Alaska, that sort of stuff, that really kind of opened my eyes to what it must be like going out off the Bering Straits and things, fishing. And I think if you get those key influencers and platforms, then it's a kind of a win-win, and it's great that you're promoting that.
And just to add to that as well, before we move on, I was recently in Connecticut last week at CMA Shipping, and I joined a panel of individuals. It was a student panel, and we were talking to some cadets and seafarers from the States. And afterwards, I had a really interesting conversation with a gentleman from Canada. I won't mention his name, but he works with all of the religious charities around the world, and he said, I've always had this idea whereby we all come together, all the shipping companies, the charities, we put some money in a big pot, and we get the best production guys to go around and film, seafarers from the Philippines, and then the next episode, seafarers from India, seafarers from Indonesia, seafarers from Ukraine, seafarers from Russia, etc., and really, dive deep into the lifestyles of these guys and create some sort of, Netflix series, because it would be something like that where people would be like, you know what, there is a lot of downsides, there is, but actually this is a really noble career. It takes the same sort of mentality slightly to sort of people that work in the military. It's not for everyone, but for people who are, mentally strong, physically strong, want to do something that's challenging and very noble, seafaring is a great option.
Yeah, no, I could agree. I think it'd be a fantastic idea. And I watched, I don't know if you know a guy called Arthur Richer from Vortexa. We had him on the podcast a few months ago, and he was on board I think it was a tanker vessel, and he was documenting it and speaking to the different crew and going on a voyage. And that was really fascinating. It was just a great initiative, which got a lot of views and great kind of likes and things. So I think definitely opportunities there to do more in that space. It just takes, someone with a lot of influence, I'd say, to kind of share it and get it out there. So yeah, I think watch this space. I'm sure it will come soon.
Yeah, I agree.
But let's move on to the sort of the technology side. Obviously, that's the kind of core focus of the podcast here. But I mean, from your discussions and your viewpoint, how would you say the boom or the growth of technology has impacted kind of the life of mariners and seafarers over the last sort of five or so years?
Well, I think it's only getting bigger. But if you just look at the last 5 years, for example, we are now seeing Starlink rolling out into more and more vessels, which means that seafarers are connected from pretty much every corner of planet Earth, which I think is really important. For there's one side of the coin which is like, we've never had this before. Is this going to affect productivity? So naturally shipping companies are somewhat nervous, and that's why I think this integration has to be done correctly. Although, equally at the same time, what other jobs out there have ever said, we're not going to put Wi-Fi in our office because we're worried about productivity. So it's kind of like, actually, although it is new, and I understand why people would be nervous about that, no other industry has ever restricted their office workers from having Wi-Fi in case they, do a little bit of scrolling during the day. But nevertheless, I can still understand that there's that side of the coin. However, I think that with this new connectivity, it does mean that there are a lot of opportunities for technology companies that want to communicate and work with seafarers, because they are going to have so much time where they are, isolated somewhat. They have time to spend on their phones, and a lot of technology based around communication where they can speak with their families. I think those sorts of technologies are going to be really, really good. Also, those with training as well, because I think lots of seafarers are interested in upgrading their skills, are interested perhaps in eventually finding jobs ashore. How can they create that transition? So I think that technology is going to become more and more important for communication purposes, for training purposes, for the seafarers, especially now, Starlink, like I said, is rolling out, and we're seeing, faster communications from every corner of planet Earth.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the whole connectivity to shore is definitely improving, and we see that as one of the key influences when they look for jobs and employment on vessels, is that connectivity to home piece. And we touched upon this, I think, in a previous call when we were talking about the impact on safety for seafarers and how
Yeah.
technology can play a role on that. So do you think enough spotlight has been shone on the safety aspect of their kind of role? And if not, what areas of improvement do you think could be made?
Yeah, I think safety is so important, and maybe not something that enough of the technology companies are really integrating into the products. Now, from my side, when I've done research and I've spoken to seafarers or ex-seafarers and asked them about digitization, they said, yeah, it's great, it is important, it's going to play a huge role, but safety features are so important because we are literally dealing with life and death. and one wrong mistake, can be catastrophic. So I think that understanding this is very, very, very important. Even security measures, looking at cybersecurity and things like that. So it needs to be something that's really integrated within each technology platform, researched, because a lot of these tech guys that are creating these platforms have not been seafarers before, or maybe in some cases don't come from a shipping background. So they might not be necessarily aware to the importance of safety. I'd say it's the number one part. Before you integrate anything else, you need to make sure that safety is completely and utterly across the whole, production purpose.
And would you say that is mainly aimed towards the more kind of vessel performance, the more technical shipping applications that are obviously dealing more closely with the ship as opposed to like a fleet monitoring type of tool? Which I imagine it is. But what examples can you give of where technology can improve safety? I mean, are we talking more about the hardware, equipment, like maintenance, sort of, I don't know, management, or is it in other areas you can think of?
It's a good question. I think in terms of examples, for me, I think more about fleet management, just because my thing is crew, right? I'm my mindset is thinking about crew, and I think that we need to make sure that we're implementing safety strategies that really are within the interest of the crew. How can crew perform their jobs to the highest ability, and we can create leverage with this technology to be able to help that, and develop better productivity. Whether it be, I've seen some stuff where it's like creating more productivity by doing certain activities that save carbon footprints, etc. And this sort of stuff is great, and gamifying these sorts of things. This sort of stuff is great, but let's make sure that we implement safety features and regulations across all of it. From the upper side, when it comes to the bridge and all that sort of stuff, cybersecurity, insanely important. But that's not really where my mindset is. I'm thinking more about crew, life and death situations. How can we make sure that all seafarers are safe while using this technology, and performing their job to the highest measures?
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, there's examples of companies like RightShip, and I know One Ocean. They've got areas of focus very closely on safety, and I guess linking to the classification societies as well. They'll have a big piece in that, and whether like the policy sort of drives the safety point, I think is really important. I mean, I guess there's examples like things like collision avoidance systems, that sort of stuff, to really help the actual safety of the vessel, like shipping systems and Orc AI, those sort of guys, which I think is awesome. But I guess on the other side, on the training side, you've got the simulation, perhaps more advanced simulations of like either from the bridge point of view, or I guess training exercises, that sort of stuff. You see more and more coming on. And Ocean's Technology Group with their online courses and platforms. Seems like there's more and more things, like resources available to hopefully improve this area.
Yeah, it's so important, because fatalities do happen at sea, and we have to make sure that whatever we do, we reduce that number. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are, but they are high. They are higher than most other jobs. So let's figure out a way of how we can completely run that down.
Yeah, good. Okay, awesome. Well, what I'd like to do now, if it's cool, all right with you, we'll talk a bit more about your role and obviously your career in marketing, because I mean, a number of the companies that we recruit for, they kind of go through a phase of maybe stage one, kind of getting their funding, and they build the tech first. So it's mainly hiring software developers, then perhaps product managers, and then they go to market with their sales and marketing functions. So can you give us a quick overview of your kind of what a digital marketer does, like what their role entails?
Yeah, sure. So digital marketing, there's two different sides to digital marketing. There's branding, and then there's also sales, right? So there are digital marketing tools nowadays where you can directly put X amount in and receive X amount back. Really easy to calculate the value. And that is a very, very important implementation if you're, rolling something out that's B2C and B2B actually for that matter. But if you want to run ads, if you want to create email campaigns, etc., it's really easy to see how much you've invested and how much you got in return. But what interests me more is that branding side. That's where that's what I fell in love with when I first entered the world of advertising, is that psychological marketing, right? And that's where my digital marketing expertise really lies. How can we plant seeds in the minds of the consumers that we are trying to communicate with, whereby they might not choose to use our product the first time or the second time or the third time, but you better believe that the sixth or seventh or eighth time they've seen our branding, we've communicated with them digitally somehow, and then all of a sudden a time goes, if it's a charity for example and they need help, they go, well, I see this name all the time, and now I'm in a situation where I need to ask for some assistance support, or I need to call up for some help. I'm only going to turn to this one brand because that's who I see all the time. And it's the exact same with every other business. It's all about psychological marketing. How can we,
even recruitment for us, it's the same.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
it is.
true.
It's about that sort of 6th, 7th, 8th touch point where hopefully you're front of mind, as you say, as long as you come across with the right sort of messages and people can start to hopefully buy into your values and your sort of, I guess, kind of language in a way. So I very much preaching to the choir. It's what we try and work on projects all the time, like newsletter campaigns, like obviously direct outreach and calling and things. So yeah,
it's
it's
so
a really
important.
key role.
It's so important to be consistent, but also it's so important to be creative, because most of the time you will have competitors. And if you have competitors, you have to make sure that you are doing campaigns, digital campaigns, creating content which stands out above those guys and girls. So how can you make sure you do that? You have to apply a strong social media content creation strategy whereby you are developing stuff that genuinely interests the seafarer.
Yeah.
So the seafarer sees it and they remember it. And like I said, again, all about planting seeds.
Yeah, and for the seafarer audience in particular, you mentioned things like YouTube, I guess perhaps now TikTok more so. How important would you say normal email campaigns, newsletters is effective for them as well, or is it more the social media side?
I think that it's important to have more than one avenue. So I think that emails, are effective. However, I've seen crazy numbers through social media. We for one of my clients the other day, we ran an influencer campaign with an Indian influencer. He has about 300,000 followers on Instagram and about 100,000 on YouTube. We posted a video with him. We developed a campaign. Took about 3 or 4 days to develop the campaign, get it filmed. And a lot of the footage he was on shore, but a lot of the footage we used was when he was on ship before, because he's a content creator. He's constantly filming while he's on board.
Wow.
And the campaign was based around staying active and staying fit while on board. So the importance of using gyms, taking a run around deck, even taking a walk, just staying physically active. And it got 160,000 plays within 48 hours, and 10,000 likes, 7,000 shares. And that was pretty much more engagement in one video than, I would argue, the whole social media before in one video. So it can erupt like that. The thing about emails is once you send it out, you can't really control whether they see it. Is it going to get buried? Is it going to go to their junk? There are ways that you can create email campaigns that are more engaging. Subject lines are really, really important. But with social media content, I know that these guys are on their phones, on Instagram. I know they're scrolling, because so am I, and so is everybody in the world. So if I can create a campaign that gets that kind of results like that, and then we even, so there's two, again, goes back to that 2 ways. Yes, there's a psychological branding side, which is great. 160,000 people have seen our logo. But now, if I can keep creating touching points with this consumer base, then I can start to look to divert that traffic towards my product or service down the line. So
Yeah.
TikTok's so important. TikTok is huge. It's so easy to go viral on TikTok. There's a guy called Ivan Guzman in the Philippines who's got 2.3 million followers on TikTok. That's insane. He's a seafarer, and his follower base. Yes, it's not all going to be seafarers and cadets, but you better believe it's a strong concentration of seafarers and cadets because they're interested in his life. He was at Crew Connect last year. You've also got those on the higher end. So you've got your Chief McCoys, your Praneet Mehtas, Chief Engineers, really big YouTube channels, 150,000 plus subscribers, more based around educational content, which is also very important. And there is still a big demand for. So you've got the younger stuff, which is more about having fun and being creative and vlog style. Then you've got the more educational side. And as I said, each country, each culture consumes content, more on one platform than the other. I found that Instagram's really big in India. Facebook's bigger in the Philippines. TikTok's banned in India, but TikTok's not banned in the Philippines. More the European countries, they're way bigger on Instagram. LinkedIn's also very big for higher ranks you go. So again, it all depends. And then this is why it's so important to have a social media strategy. You need someone who understands the platforms because you can't, because these platforms are changing literally on a weekly basis. Algorithms are changing all the time.
Data privacy rules, that sort of thing, like even Apple's phone, like the iOS sort of changes and things which impacts deliverability, that type of thing. I know I've got recently started an e-commerce business called Remote Work Technologies, and a big part of that is digital marketing across different channels and things. And I've learned so much more about digital marketing in this like 2-month spell of having this e-commerce business than I have in 12 plus years of recruitment. And that's just completely opened my eyes, and now I'm trying to adapt it to the recruitment business we've got. So I really fascinating space. So I hope you don't mind, we'll move along a little bit, just a couple more questions. But yeah, I guess you're obviously from the agency side in a sense. You've got your own business. What sort of benefits do you see as a business owner having, like either their in-house, in-person sort of dedicated digital marketer, as opposed to using an agency? Probably a slightly biased answer you might have, but overall, what are sort of the pluses and minuses?
I love this question because it's something that I come across all the time. And I'll summarize it quite simply. If you have 99.9% of the time, I speak to in-house marketing teams. When it comes to social media, when it comes to content creation, it tends to be something that they are very reactive to. So when they've done a conference, when they've done something interesting, they decide to post it on social media. There's no strategy behind it because, frankly, these marketing people have about 10 responsibilities outside of social media. So specializing on that one particular area is not something they have the capability of being able to do. They might be really good at it, but they've also got to focus on this area, this area, this area. Marketing in-house, as from my experience, not just in maritime, but in all industries, 99.9% of the time, is very generalized. It's kind of like, we don't really know what to do with these guys. We want them to do a bit of this. We want them to do a bit of that. But what you need, and this is why agencies are so great, or consultants are so great. You need someone who actually focuses on that one area, not a jack of all trades, but a master of one. Definitely. So if you can develop a relationship or with a consultant or an agency that just 8 hours a day focus on social media platforms, that is how you're going to be able to utilize the best strategies. And companies do have the budgets to do it, but I still think it's quite new. They don't quite understand the value behind it yet, but it's going to get more and more important in the future. Because your consumer base are no longer interested, sadly, in print. Print is dying. It is dying. and digitization is getting bigger and bigger. And instead of being somewhat naive to think that, you know, your consumer base is definitely going to use your technology, firstly look at using the technology that you know they're using, and then use that technology to introduce them to yours.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and also dedicated kind of specialist marketers. They're keeping up with trends as well, and
Yeah,
new developments, latest tech, and people's trends, customers' trends. So I've
which
got
changes every day. Every day,
yeah.
it's such a fast changing environment. You need to have someone that specializes to be able to stay up to date with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've got specialist content creators in the Philippines. Funny enough, they're all in the Philippines as well. Philippines to do solely like content creation and design. Another one does specifically Google Ads, and that's solely for that. And it's just sort of nicely spread out. Yeah, so definitely, I agree. Unless you have a big team and a big business where you can hire someone that just focuses on PR and comms, another person's like digital, another one's maybe video, etc. But that obviously becomes a bigger project. But for now, just to wrap things up, are there any other insights or tips you'd like to share, either about the business that you're running or marketing kind of roles in general?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to advise everybody to look at Maersk on social media. I know that these guys are the biggest and they've got massive budgets, but they are. I a lot of my influence comes from what these guys do on social media. They have a fantastic social media feed. Their content is on point, and you
Okay.
can also achieve just as good content on a smaller budget. You just have to work with the right people. Focus on if you can't get on board a ship with your camera crew, which is very difficult to do, obviously, focus on creating relationships with seafarer influencers, but the right seafarer influencers. Test out campaigns. You know, there's loads of guys and girls out there that have 10K plus followers, but sometimes their message might not sync as well as it does with another one. It's all about testing. Digital
Yeah.
marketing is all about testing. We're never going to
Yeah.
hit things right the first time. We have to do A and B testing. So I would recommend to anyone out there, if you're interested in doing social media, if you don't want to hire someone like me and you want to do it yourselves, and you're within the space whereby you want to communicate with seafarers, which is it's the only thing I'm interested in. But if that's something you want to do, my first spot would be find these influencers on board ships, create relationships with them, and start running campaigns with them. It doesn't cost much money at all, and the effect can be ginormous.
Yeah.
You also need to take into consideration that you need to create content that appeals to seafarers, and you can't always rely on influencers all the time because it takes time to get these campaigns done, etc. So you have to be creative with your graphic design, etc., and things like that. But if you're gonna do it, and you don't want to hire someone or you don't have the resources to do that, first thing I'd recommend is work with these influencers. It can be a game changer.
No, great advice. Okay. Good. And obviously, if anybody would like to reach out to yourself and have a chat about this in more detail, or learn more about your business and kind of perhaps working together, what's the best way for them to do so?
So we're building a website at the moment for Seafarer Social, and it's all a bit confusing there at the moment. We're in the final stages of building. It takes a while to get these things done. If you want to communicate with me about Seafarer Social, please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best way for me to communicate at the moment. I'm on there every day, and I'm also going to be coming to as many of the maritime shows this year as possible. I'm looking at Singapore. Shipping Week, I'm definitely coming to Bostonia. I'm definitely going to be coming to Manila for Crew Connect. So you know, if I can meet you in person, fantastic. And if you want to communicate digitally, then please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Carl King. I'm sure there'll be an easy way of finding me online nowadays. But
Yeah.
yeah, Seafarer Social website is also going to be launching in the next couple of weeks, and I do have an email which is related to that. It's just again, we're syncing it up to the website, so it's a little bit confusing at the moment. So LinkedIn for now is the best way to communicate, and if not, I'll catch you at one of the big shows.
Brilliant. No, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll put your details in the links to the show notes, and obviously we'll be sharing this on LinkedIn ourselves. So, yeah, thank you so much, Carl. Great to hear your story, your journey. Nice to meet another kind of business founder and owner that's going through the sort of the highs and lows, I'm sure, of that sort of journey. So, thanks for coming on, and yeah, let's catch up again soon.
Thank you, Callum, for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Pleasure, no problem.